I'm Woody Huffines. I own the NerdsToGo in McKinney in Frisco, Texas, and this is Tech for the Untechnical. Whoever heard of an Internet of Things doorstop? It turns out that a lot of people have inadvertently purchased an Internet of Things doorstop. They didn't buy it as a doorstop, it just turned into a doorstop later. The latest one of these is Charter, which bought Spectrum. Spectrum had an Internet of Things security system that they sold through Spectrum Home customers. And then Charter bought Spectrum, and as of the 5th of February here, in a couple of days, if you have those devices, they're going to be useless because Charter wants out of the home security business. So they're going to turn off their internet infrastructure. So that security camera that you bought from Spectrum for your Internet of Things security devices are going to turn into nothing more than doorstops because they're not going to work. The same thing happened in November of last year when Best Buy, who had an Insignia line, they had an Insignia line of devices, and you could buy in Best Buy Insignia devices, and they decided that they didn't want to be in the internet infrastructure business anymore and turned off their internet infrastructure. So all of those Insignia in-home devices turned into doorstops. Well, not necessarily absolutely useless. If you have a plug and it's an Internet of Things plug and you can control that plug from your smartphone, it'll still work as an electrical plug, but you can't program it anymore or use your phone to turn it on or turn it off because the application no longer works because the application's not connecting to an internet infrastructure on the back end to send the commands out. If you want to know a little bit more about IP and networking, there's a video up here. But the bottom line is if an Internet Things device depends on an internet connection and an internet infrastructure to work, and that infrastructure goes away, that device becomes useless to you. It becomes doorstop. Cameras are a really good example. An Internet of Things security camera doesn't store the security footage on the camera, it stores it in the cloud. So as the information comes into the camera sends it over the network, and then it's stored in an offline database somewhere out in the cloud. And if you want to see that data, you got to go to the cloud infrastructure to look at it. But if they turn that off, then that camera doesn't have any place to send that data to. Bummer. Doorstop doesn't work anymore. Now for things like a refrigerator, Insignia and Best Buy, they sold an internet-enabled refrigerator, and it'll still be a refrigerator. It'll still keep your milk cold, but you can't look at it from your phone anymore because the application and the internet architecture are going to go away. The same thing happened with a bunch of Internet of Things devices that Lowe's Home Improvement sold. That was last year, and earlier than that last year, the Nest thermostat. When Amazon bought the Nest thermostat, they had some backwards compatibility and they just cut it off because they wanted to get everything into the Echo standard. So when you're looking at Internet of Things devices, how do you determine what your risk is in the long term for your camera or your light bulb turning into a doorstop that's just a plain old camera or just a plain old plug in the wall that doesn't have an Internet of Things back into it? Well, first thing I'd recommend is buy things from manufacturers as opposed to third-party sellers. Now, third-party seller is like Charter Communications or Spectrum Communications and Lowe's, and in the case of Best Buy, the Insignia devices. They aren't manufacturers. Best Buy is not a manufacturer of those things, and if they bring it in-home, in their business, and they say, we're going to label and sell some manufacturer stuff as Insignia devices, for example, and they decide they don't want to be in that business anymore, you got a problem. That's the same thing that happened to Charter Communications with the Spectrum devices, and the same thing that happened to Lowe's. So the first thing is you're probably better off if you buy from a manufacturer, somebody that builds network and network architecture things. The Unify Ubiquiti line, for example, is what we use and we have good success with. But Ubiquiti or Unify is in the business of selling that stuff. They're in the business of maintaining that infrastructure. So I've got a pretty good feeling that they aren't going to go away. So an in-store brand or an in-store set of devices may not be the best thing for you to do. A second thing to consider is how the communication works between your application and that device, because there's a bunch of different ways it can work. It can be Bluetooth, it can be Wi-Fi, it can be NFC or near field communication. If it is internet, which is an IP, there's video here if you want to know a little bit more about how IP works. If it's an IP thing and it requires a internet infrastructure on the back end for it to work, that infrastructure can go away and give you a problem. Think of it this way, that camera that you've got, whether it's a Ring camera or one of the Lowe's cameras or one of the Insignia cameras from Best Buy, it doesn't store the video locally, it puts it on the web, puts it in the cloud. So if that application for your phone goes away, or that website that was supposed to be storing the data goes away because that company wants out of the business, you got a doorstop. So the first thing to do is look at, is the stuff that you're buying from somebody who's in that business as their main line of business, or is it a reseller? Because if it's a reseller, they may decide that it doesn't make sense for them to be in that market, and then your Internet of Things devices become useless as internet devices. They might still work as a light bulb and might still work as a refrigerator, but what you bought them for and what you paid a premium for goes away. The second thing to consider when you look at if this is an architecture or an infrastructure that you want to buy into is, does it operate over IP directly to the device so that that device has an IP address that your home network directly communicates with, or does it have a hub? There's the Z-Wave hub and the Zigbee hub. Anyway, there's a thing that's an intermediate piece of hardware, if you will, that your home network talks to the hub and then the hub talks to the device. Hue light bulbs, for example, you've got a hub that it talks, that your network talks to the hub and then the hub talks to the device. As those things come in and out of favor, you may end up with Internet of Things doorstops if that infrastructure goes away. Now that's about to get better because Zigbee and Z-Wave and Amazon and Google have all gotten together, and they're going to talk about building a single standard so the devices are interoperable, because that's one of the problems. For example, when the Charter Communication stuff goes away, those are Zigbee, I think, hubs, but they had a proprietary programming. So there's some discussion that if you've got those devices, you can do a factory reset, get a Zigbee hub, and then continue to use the devices on some other system or with some other provider. But those other providers, think about this, they're not excited about picking up somebody else's stuff because they want to make the money selling the stuff and maintaining the stuff and having the web architecture. So if you want to avoid an Internet of Things doorstop, you want to avoid your Internet of Things devices getting dumb, buy from the manufacturer. Try to buy things that are straight to IP or straight to Bluetooth so that you don't require an internet architecture in the background. If you have any questions about it, give us a call. I'm Woody Huffines. I own the NerdsToGo in McKinney and Frisco, Texas. Hit the subscribe button below, ring the notification bell, mash the like button, share it with your friends, and we'll see you next time.